Hi there, my name's Caroline. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Huddersfield and I teach on the journalism, media and film studies courses. I teach in radio production, audio production and all those sorts of areas. And today I'm going to talk to you about one of the key elements of audio and radio production, but it's also a skill set that could be used in lots of other places as well. And that's about the interview. Okay, the interview is one of the core things that we use in telling stories through radio. So I'm just going to share my presentation with you now, and then at the end I've got a couple of tasks for you to do. So the types of interviews we're talking about today are interviews on location. So this is you going out somewhere and interviewing someone with a recording device. If we're at university, we have Zoom recorders, but you can also, and increasingly journalists and audio practitioners are using their smartphones. So when we talk about this, particularly for journalism, we talk about creating doing interviews for production for cuts, wraps and packages. Now these are terms you might have come across before, but if not, I've provided a glossary so that you can check out what those terms mean and how I use them. So why do we interview? The interview is one of the most important tools we as journalists or media producers have to obtain information. It allows us to expand on information we may have from other sources, to clarify facts and see things from different perspectives. It allows for different voices. This also allows us to include those other voices and keep the audio experience varied. It's really difficult if you hear the same voice all the way through a radio production. Each new voice and sound is a way to hook the listener in and encourage them to carry on listening. So what we need to be doing is considering what the listener wants, what they want to hear. They usually want to hear something new. They want to hear interesting details. They want context and clarity. That means they want to be, whatever the story we're telling, and we want to put it in context of different people, the people who were involved. And generally people want to hear interesting stories. We're quite nosy. We want to hear about other people's experiences. This is a really important part of audio storytelling. And so what do we need from the interview? Well, we start off with the 6 W's. So the 6 W's are who was involved, what happened, what's the story, what are the details, how can they tell us about what happened, when did it take place? Particularly in journalism, the when is really important. When do things happen? Is it yesterday? Is it breaking news today? Or is this someone bringing us up to date about something that maybe happened a while ago? In more media related stories, it's also important to put things into context. So we need to know the when. Where? In journalism, that becomes important. Are we telling local journalism about things that are happening in just a small region around us? Are we telling national stories? Or are we telling about something that's happened on the other side of the world? We also quite often are trying to give a why. Why did this happen? What was the reason that it happened? So we really get the why in there. And then finally, we put that W at the end of the word and we go how. Okay, so that's linked into how it happened. Again, that's part of the storytelling. So we use these 6 W's to be the starting point of how we construct our interviews. And there's other things to consider as well. I told you that we use our interviews, sometimes we use interviews as standalone, but quite often we're using our interviews as clips or what we call cuts. We're trying to get quotes, so we get the salient facts, the bits of information that we want, and we want them as bite-sized sound bites, okay, that we can use in full stories, in packages and programs. We also need things to be accurate. Okay, so don't ever be afraid to check with your interviewee, ask them to repeat something. Double check when you get back. It's fine to check things from other sources. Sometimes people you're interviewing get things wrong, or there are 2 sides to a story. Okay. Sound bites are king in radio. We use them a lot. We use them in program making. They should be, again, about grabbing the listener's attention. They should be the most memorable, telling part of the interview. Quite often we use them to promote our story. Okay, so we might use a really good quote to try and entice people to listen, all right, when we're encouraging them to listen to our whole full-length program. They are the jewel in the crown. So the first thing we need to do is figure out who to interview. So it depends on the topic. All right. So we want to interview someone who knows what they're talking about. So usually we're going for an expert. If we want to talk to someone, if our story is about something like climate change or something to do with the environment, then we want to try and talk to someone either who is an environmental scientist, or it might be someone who is part of a campaign to do with the environmental science, someone who's studied it. Okay. If we're telling a story that's about an experience, so let's take recent things that are happening, okay, across the world. If we want to tell a story about COVID-19, then we need to talk to, so everyone's experiencing it, but there are some people who are more of an expert. So there's scientists, or there might be medical practitioners, there might be someone who has actually contracted the disease. Those people will have different stories to tell. Or for some of our students who have been in the UK, but they're Chinese students trying to get back, they might have stories about how it was difficult to return home, or how difficult it was to be away from home. So all of these different people have different stories, okay? Sometimes you want 2, 3, 4 experts, or people who have experiences. So there are 2 different types of experts. They are like academic or specialists in that subject experts, or they're someone who are an expert because they've experienced the situation. The important thing when you're carrying out an interview like this is to do some research. You need 2 things. Once you've identified who it is that you're going to talk to, you've arranged your interview, you've contacted them, then you need to do some research about your interviewee. If there's something else you can find out. If there's things that you can easily find out on the internet, you need to know those things in advance. Okay, sometimes you want them to explain that to you in audio, and you can say, oh, you know, I saw that you your first book was about such and such. Could you tell us a bit more about how you started writing that book? Okay, and then the second thing you want to do is talk about do a bit of research on the topic, so that you know that you're asking questions that are going to actually give us answers. All right. And then the second part of your plan, after you've done your research, is to plan your questions. Know what you want to find out, okay? Know what the focus is. What is the clear thing that you want to find out about your interview? If your interview is about trampolining, then what is the focus? Is it that you want to know the experience about trampolining, what it feels like to actually jump up and down? Or is it that you want to find out if that's good for fitness? Okay, or is it the story that's all about how trampoline can be bad for you and hurt you in some way? So you need to know what the focus of your story is. There's all sorts of different ways to look at a particular topic. And then don't forget your W's. These are the things that will help you write your questions, okay? Because all of those words allow you to go for questions that get people to answer in an open way. So what we want to avoid are closed questions. These are questions like that come out with a yes or no answer. We don't want those usually. Do you agree with this? Yes. Is Kanye West controversial? Yes. Okay. We don't want to have those questions that are just yes, no answers, because for radio, we can't see people. So we can't put pictures with the answers to the question, and we can't see how people's facial expression or anything like that. So we're relying on them to tell descriptive stories, longer answers that give us more information. So we're not looking for closed questions. We are looking for what are called open questions, and our W words allow us to ask those open questions. What do you think to inflated gig ticket prices? How do you feel about fast fashion? Talk me through your favorite music. All of those give the interviewee the opportunity to tell you, okay? They're giving them the opportunity. Most people who you interview will want to tell you their story, but not always. So sometimes you have to make sure that you give them every opportunity to tell you what you want to hear. So examples of that is, tell me what happened from the start. What did you do after that? Okay, so if they haven't given you all the information, you know there's more, give them the opportunity to enlarge upon that. How did you get into this? Take them back to the beginning of the story. And also remember about people's feelings. Usually really good stories are about personal experiences, even when you're talking to an expert. So how does it make you feel? What has been the biggest effect on the community? What are your biggest disappointments? Where do you go from here? None of these questions you can answer yes or no to. You have to say more, okay? Once you've identified roughly what sort of questions you're going to do, you need to consider the order of your questions. Make sure you write them down in a notepad. Quite often nowadays, people will write down questions on their phone, which is absolutely fine, unless you're using the phone as your recording device. If you're using the phone as your recording device, you need to have the questions on a different pad, okay? Once you've identified what those questions are, write them down in order, okay? Think about what that order is. How do you want the story to progress? Do you want them to tell you, you know, how did this happen? How did this accident happen? And then they can tell you about how someone just walked out into the road and the car came around the corner and it all happened too quickly, all right? Or you can start with how you make you feel. How are you feeling now after the accident? Or if it's a sporting related one, how does it feel to win this amazing game? And then you start with, how does it feel to begin? How does it feel to win this amazing game? And then you might go to, what was your key strategy going into the game? And you can come to that afterwards. All right. Think about if there's anything, your question you're going to ask that's difficult or might make someone upset or angry. Put that towards the end once you've gained their confidence and you've relaxed them into the interview. Okay. The next step is thinking about being prepared. All right. So while we have to do all the stuff to do with preparing questions, we also need to be prepared in terms of our technical devices. So increasingly, we can use our smartphones. All smartphones have some sort of recording device on them, and there are lots of apps you can download. All right. So there's some basic things that you need to make sure that you have before you're going into it. If you're using a separate recording device, make sure it's either charged or has batteries. And with your phone, especially things like phones, you might have used it to get to the location. Not so much at the moment, we're all staying at home, but you might have used it to navigate. So make sure that you take your charger with you and you make sure that your phone is charged and it's going to stay charged all the way through your interview. Make sure your audio is optimized. Okay, so when I talk about optimized, I mean that most phones will be as efficient as they possibly can. So you know, when you take photos on your phone, you can either have low quality photos or you can get really high quality photos and you can change the quality of them. Well, you can do that with audio. So if you go into your settings on your phone, you can probably look at that right now, and you go into your settings, you should be able to see if you can optimize it. I'll show you how to do this on my phone just for a moment. Okay, I'm going to just stop sharing this. I'm going to come back to here. So this is my phone. All right, now I just use I've got two apps that I use for recording. One is the voice memo that just comes with the phone, and the other one is voice recorder. So you can see these right in the middle on my phone. Okay, if I go into the settings, okay, on my phone and find the particular app for this, okay, so I'm going to find voice memos. All right, and right towards the bottom, okay, it tells me about audio quality here. All right, so there's two different types of audio quality that you can see on there. There's either compressed or lossless. And if I want compressed, that's smaller file sizes, efficient, which is fine for just taking voice memos. But if I want to have it for recording that I'm going to use for radio, I want it as lossless. Okay, so most voice recording apps will have this sort of change that you can go into the settings and change. It's really easy to do. Okay. So I'm going to go back to sharing my presentation. Yeah. There we go. So make sure that your audio is optimized. If you're using a smartphone, go to the settings and change the audio to uncompressed. And this is a really top tip. Make sure you put your headphones in when you're recording. You pick up all sorts of things when you use your headphones. It allows you to hear a background noise. Our ears are really, really clever. All right. What they do is they filter out any background noise. So if we're in quite a noisy place, so say we're out in the garden or we're out by traffic or something like that, our ears start to filter out all of this noise so we can concentrate on the person that we're talking to and what they're saying. All right, but our recording devices can't do that. So if we're in a noisy place, we need to be aware of it. If we put our headphones in, we can hear that sort of thing. So make sure that you consider wearing headphones at least at the beginning of your recording. Okay. So next thing, we've been prepared. What are we going to do at the interview? So firstly, make sure the recorder is placed between you and the interviewee. If you're using some sort of other recording device, you'll probably be able to place it equally between you. You might be moving it around in between you and the interviewee. Make sure you do that as little as possible. But the important thing is that it's between you and the interviewee, especially if you want to use it as a standalone interview. If you're using clips only, prioritize picking up the audio from your interviewee. Okay, that's the person you're interviewing. Okay. Don't forget to press record. It's really easy to get into chatting to someone and forget that you actually need to record it. That's another good reason for putting your headphones on. Don't be in a rush to finish. Take your time, look at your questions. It's fine to pause in between. Remember, this is for radio, it's on location, and you can edit this afterwards. We're not going to get to editing today, but you can edit it afterwards. Make sure that you're actively listening to the answers. Okay, sometimes a person will answer a question you're going to say later in their answer. All right, so you need to make sure that you're listening and that you can react and change. You never know what someone's going to say to an interview, so you need to make sure that you're actively listening to what they're saying. So that ties into taking time. And if you don't understand something that they've said, especially if someone's an expert, they talk in with a lot of complicated jargon, remember what you want to do is make it interesting for your listener. So don't be afraid to ask someone to repeat their answer. And finally, and this is really important because you want to edit this later, don't talk over your interviewee. Make sure that any talking that you do is once they've finished speaking. All right. A good thing to get into is nodding and smiling. Okay. So if you nod and you smile when you're conducting your interview, then they know that you're listening. Or if they're saying something sad, obviously you need to look sad, but try not to talk over the top of your interviewee. Okay. A couple of things that are really important when you're recording for radio, you need to get permission. So make sure that you always get permission on there and get their personal information. You never know when you might need it for other things, and it's good to get it recorded. So get their full name, get their age, if that's appropriate. Important to get their job title. People don't like it when you get their job title wrong. And if there's any background info, you might not use it in the information, but if you've got it all recorded, you've got it there. Always check spellings. Increasingly, the things that we use for radio, we might also use on a website. So we might be writing information as well as listening to it. And also check pronunciation in case somebody else has got to present that person's name and the name is complicated to say. So make sure that you check the spelling, write it in your notepad, and check the pronunciation. Get them to say their name, and then you know you've got it right. If you've been communicating them through some other form, for instance, social media or via email, now's the opportunity to get their telephone number in case you need to check back later on any of the facts. Remember, it's okay to double check things. If there's something they say in their interview and you're not quite sure, make sure you double check. And always remember to say thank you. You never know when you might need to interview them again, so it's good to be on good terms with the people that you're interviewing. So we're going to finish today, and we've got 2 tasks. I'm going to go through in detail what the recording task is. So that's a really important one to follow. But I've also got a listening task for you. So before you do the recording task, your teacher will go through what the listening task is. I've got there's a piece of audio for you to listen to. Listen to it all the way through, and I want you to know how many different interviews there are in that piece. Once you've done that, you'll get the opportunity to carry out your own interview today in pairs. So I want you to conduct an interview on one of the following topics: either a great adventure or your best meal ever. you need to split into pairs and decide what you're going to interview each other. So if you're someone who like has an amazing meal, you can be interviewed on that. Or if you've been on a great adventure, you can be interviewed on that. Tell your partner some basic information about it, not too much detail. You don't want to spoil the interview. Once you've decided on that topic, okay, and you can both do different ones, that's fine, you need to do some research. Take about 15 minutes to do some research on the topic, all right? Depending on what topic it is you have will depend on how you go about that research. Find out a bit of information. You can do that on the internet, all right? The next thing is plan your questions. Remember what I said, write those questions down, okay? Make sure you've got a good order. You want to aim for between 3 or 5 questions. You can have a couple more if needed, and don't include things like what's your name, all right? That's going to be standard. These are the proper questions that are going to investigate what you're saying. And then finally, find a quietish space, okay, in your room and record an interview. Both of you should interview each other, so at the end of it, each of you ends up with one interview that you've conducted, okay? Thanks very much for listening to me today. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy doing the 2 tasks. There's some resources to go along with this that your teacher should have. Thanks for listening to me today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.